All right, joining us now, anchor and chief Washington correspondent for CNN, Jake Tapper, and national political correspondent for Axios, Alex Thompson. They are co-authors of the new book entitled Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. Interesting timing for the book, given everything. Good to have you both on. I guess I'll start with kind of an obvious question, but Jake, is it fair to say that Joe Biden had a successful presidency, remarkable presidency, possibly even a historic presidency in his time in office?
Well, he certainly feels that way, and we don't really render...
Well, when you look at the legislation that he passed and his accomplishments and how it ranks against other presidents?
I'm not here to render a verdict on how successful a president he was. Certainly, he feels that way. You can point to any number of accomplishments he had having to do with NATO or the infrastructure bill or the CHIPS Act, and on and on. And that will be for history to decide. Obviously, the American people thought that the country was on the wrong track and took issue with the border and inflation and his age and acuity. But this book is more focused on what happened. You know, we all saw the debate June 27th. We were all shocked. We were all stunned at his inability to communicate his thoughts and the record that you speak of to the American people. And Alex and I set out to figure out what happened.
Right.
So Mika's question's a good question because, you know, he's always mocked and ridiculed by Democrats early on about, oh, you can't deal with Republicans. You pass more bipartisan legislation than just about anybody. I always talked about the Wall Street Journal article in June, which we ought to discuss, which actually had to use Kevin McCarthy as a source, who then contradicted what he said before. And yet after that, he did some pretty intensive negotiations to get Evan out of Gaza. So here's the question, and I think in reading the book, you all are not passing judgment, but correct me if I'm wrong, on whether he had the skills and the capabilities to run the White House effectively versus a political campaign. Or are you saying that he was incapable of doing his duties as president of the United States?
I'm saying by 2024, there were members of the cabinet that did have some concerns, not necessarily about a day-to-day, but what if there was a massive crisis in the middle of the night? There were some cabinet members that did have concerns by that last year.
There were definitely people in his administration who wondered, after the debate, who was actually running the country. Yeah. That's not something that Alex and I say, but it is something that Democrats and people who worked for Biden wondered.
So, and by the way, Evan was released from Russia, not Gaza. So here's my question that I'd love for you guys to answer, because I was in there real time. I was talking to people who were friends before the Biden administration with me, will be friends with me long after the Biden administration. I talked about just about everybody, but I will just say out loud, never was close to Donilon, didn't really talk to him much, didn't talk to Ricchetti. And so the people I talked to, though, we had real-time conversations over years. So I'm curious, did you have 200 people telling you this guy was incapable of being president of the United States, or this guy had changed so radically?
So I guess
Do you understand my question?
Yes.
Because I know, though, whoever you talk to, chances are good. I know him, and I've talked to him in real time, and I never got that.
So one of the things that's very important to understand about the reporting from this book is that we spoke with more than 200 people, most of them Biden-loving Democratic insiders, and almost all the interviews were after the election. Right. Because after the election, people felt much more free to come forward and talk to us.
But wouldn't, if you're a cabinet secretary and you say he can't do his basic, which is said in the book, the four of them, I'm just asking, should those people be granted anonymity? How can you sit there if you knew he wasn't capable of being president of the United States?
It's a great question.
And then wait until he's out of office and go, okay, now I'm going to get this off my chest.
No, it's late. It's absolutely a great question for the sources in the book, and many of them expressed regret that they hadn't come forward until Election Day. The bottom line is, the reason that Biden, his wife, his son, Donilon, Ricchetti, and others convinced themselves that what they were doing was in the best interest of the country was,
right.
One, they thought only Joe Biden could defeat Donald Trump. They were convinced of that. Two, they thought that Donald Trump posed an existential threat to the republic.
Right.
And if you think that those are the stakes, you can justify almost anything.
Well, they also thought, three, as you all point out, that Kamala Harris couldn't beat Donald Trump, right?
That's
How much
true.
of that was
and then
driving?
I mean, how much of it was them looking for a reason versus what was the reality? But you go back to that 2019 primary. Almost every candidate filled out that ACLU questionnaire.
Right.
That became infamous, right? Joe Biden did not, because they felt that it was going to take them too far to the left. They knew that Kamala Harris had run to the left. In fact, actually, some people in the Biden orbit said when they knew the title of our book, they were like, the original sin actually was picking Kamala Harris because Biden's heart was with Gretchen Whitmer, because he saw her as sort of a next generation of Biden Democrat.
Right.
But he picked Kamala Harris because it was, we're going to unite the party. We're not going to have a Bernie Hillary schism. We're going to pick a more progressive person.
All right. A few thoughts and feelings and then a question. I really loved reading the book. It was really beautifully written, great reporting.
Thank you.
And it was
Trust me, there has to be a but coming here. Go ahead. I know.
We're ready.
I know.
There is. I really enjoyed reading it, and there's stuff in there I didn't know before. It was not news he was older. Even in the campaign that he won.
Sure.
He called a guy fat in New Hampshire, and we all covered it in real time.
Sure.
We've talked, David Ignatius' piece, we debated this and covered this in real time.
Yeah.
And one of the contentions you make is that the media didn't do its part, or did way too late. And what's not in the book is the day after the debate, Joe, very painfully, immediately says Biden should step out of the race. It was really a big change for the direction of the show. I personally went on a very long plea for him to stay in the race, and I still stand by it. Nobody agrees with me. But we debated this, and we covered this, and my point is that we did this in real time. There is definitely new information in this book, great reporting, but I want to understand why you're using words like cover-up, which insinuates a crime or something. Was a crime committed? Because we're in an environment where we are covering an administration that is actually in office right now, that is pushing the limits of the law in every way.
Yeah.
And so
which Alex and I cover every day at Axios.
I know
CNN.
you do, but you've given hours and hours to this book, and was there a cover-up that is actually like a...
What's the cover-up?
To be clear, we're not arguing there's any sort of crime. But I would say, I watched you guys on the show the day after the debate. I could see sort of the, in some ways, heartbreak and shock.
Right.
But you guys were shocked by that debate, right?
Yes.
And I think the book very clearly shows that he had moments like that behind the scenes.
Before the debate.
That
If there
would
was
make
not,
sense.
if there was not a cover up, then you guys wouldn't have been shocked.
Can I ask you this? Were you shocked?
Yeah.
By the debate?
Of course, especially
Alex,
in
were you
person.
shocked by the debate?
I was there.
I've been pretty aggressively covering his age.
Right.
And also, I think there's a distinction between covering his age as a political matter versus covering what was going on behind the scenes in order to fit his limitations, which is sort of what I was doing. And so I wouldn't say I was shocked. I was a little surprised it had gotten that bad.
Fitting his limitation. Is that what's happening in today's administration?
And Willie, the thing is, again, I talk to people that know Joe Biden extraordinarily well, and I've said it on the show. We talked before the debate. They were pretty confident. Said, his voice is a little raspy, but he's, seems like he's ready to go. And then 5 minutes into the debate, they called back and were like, did he have a stroke? It was shocking in real time to a lot of people.
In hindsight, you go back and look, and you watch his gait and all the times he fell, because he broke his foot a few years ago, and
that was a lie, by the way. No, he broke his foot, but that wasn't the reason why he walked so stiffly.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In hindsight, now that you know that those were all sort of excuses pushed out by the White House. I'm curious for both of you, because it ties into the news we've been reporting this morning. Jake, I'll start with you about the PSA test, the cancer.
Yeah.
That he hadn't had a PSA test since 2014.
Yeah.
It boggles the mind to think that a president of his age, and people say, well, men over 70 don't always get them. You're the president of the United States.
Right.
Did you all find anything that signaled he may have had cancer when he was running for president, or that someone knew while he was president?
No, absolutely not. But I will say this. the cancer diagnosis, the prostate cancer diagnosis, and I know everybody here is wishing him the best and praying for him and his family. It illustrates two things that I think are underlined in the book. One, the difficulty of reporting anything having to do with health matters. First of all, there's always a lack of transparency, whether it's the Bidens or the Trumps or whomever. They don't willingly share this information. And two, it's difficult to report this stuff. We don't have subpoena power. We can't break into doctors' offices. And it's very sensitive. These are the most sensitive things about a person that there can be. And the second point I'd make is this is a family that has long been reluctant to share information about health. And as tragic as Beau Biden's death was and remains to this day, they were not transparent about what was going on with him. And they were not transparent about what was going on with President Biden when he was in the White House.
You can make the case, though, that their son's illness was a private matter, and for them,
but he was the sitting Attorney General of Delaware.
Right. But I mean, but if you're the President of the United States, your doctor, and you write about this, Dr. O'Connor, who's very close to the President, may have had a responsibility at least to test, right, for prostate cancer?
Yeah, but you could also argue that he had a responsibility to do a cognitive test, which is normal for people over 65, and he never did that either.
It's always a question that was raised by Dr. Jonathan Reiner, who we interviewed for the book, who's a consultant to the White House medical team and has been for many, many years. Why would you not give President Biden a cognitive test? Well, because you don't want to know the answer. That was what Reiner thought. And he thinks that the way to fix this issue, not just for Biden, but for Trump and other future presidents, is the White House doctor should have to testify under oath. He should have to submit his White House medical records under threat of perjury.
So every White House, no matter which party, Republican or Democratic administration, part of the job is to make the president look good, to make adjustments to the schedule, to set up systems they look good in versus they don't, eliminate those they don't. And that's not just second term Ronald Reagan, which is the most famous example, but also much younger presidents, and also right now, frankly, President Trump. His team works around. So what makes this administration, what they did to protect their principle?
Yes.
Why is that a cover-up and some of these others wouldn't be?
Well, I think a lot of these things started innocently enough, to your point. The speechwriting team early on realized that he couldn't give the speeches the way he used to. And so the vocabulary shrunk, the sentences shrunk, the paragraph shrunk. But by the end of 2023, I think it becomes clear that there is a bigger issue than just him struggling in ways beyond sort of normal principle, and that there's actually a decline in his ability to do the job. And I think there is a point when loyalty, there's always a tension between loyalty to the principal and loyalty to the larger institution. And I think it was at that point that there was that tension, and I think they chose loyalty to the principal.
And who was they? And this is what I really, because I know so many of the people that I'm sure you all talked to off the record, who, again, in real time, we were sort of trying to sort through and figure this out. But who is the who in this conspiracy? Is it the inner circle?
Yeah, the people that were in charge were Mike Donilon, Steve Ricchetti, Bruce Reed, Anthony Bernal, the First Lady's chief of staff, the First Lady, and Annie Tomasini. Those were the people that saw him the most and that had the most control over what he was doing and his day-to-day.
One other thing, just to your point, Jonathan, is that there is a difference between making sure that the principal, the president, has a teleprompter for when he's giving remarks in the East Room and having a teleprompter when he is doing private remarks in a 40-person fundraiser in Chicago, right? I mean, you would admit that, or you would acknowledge that's one of them. Sure, understandably, you want to have your remarks ready to go in front of the American people because you want to make sure that you're saying the right thing and you're being presidential. A private event with 40 or 50 people in Chicago that you have to have a teleprompter? Why do you have to have a teleprompter at that?
I mean, to that point, we did, though, Mika, to what you said earlier, we covered in real time. I was in the pool for one of these fundraisers. It was in New York City. And President Biden at the time, he told a story. He kind of lost his way in his notes. He told the story again. And we wrote about,
the Charlottesville story.
Forgetting that he had, so we wrote about it at the time and we covered it here as well.
You were absolutely right. And since it was widely covered, and there are new things in the book, but they are things, two things. There were things that we covered, similar to what we covered, and also Joe Biden, the way he is, like
the Bidenness, as we call it in the book.
Where he called the guy fat in New Hampshire, and or if people came after him, people still they're like, hey, get off our guy. So we love Joe Biden.
I think everybody would agree that we all saw him aging.
Yes,
2019, 2020.
that happens to people.
Yes, of course. Happens to me right now.
It's not news.
Well, it's news in the sense that when one of these incidents would happen, you guys would air them, we would air them, et cetera, and show them. Question. Yes. The question is, what else was going on? Because I would argue that there's a difference between learning, as we reveal in the book, that he didn't recognize George Clooney at that fundraiser, or that he couldn't come up with the name of Jake Sullivan behind the scenes.
That's
there's
Biden.
That's the not being able to recognize George Clooney. Is Biden?
I mean, I saw George Clooney. Fine, okay.
Anyway, or not knowing not being able to come up with the name of his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. Yeah. There's a difference between that or people, senators that we refer to in the book, having serious questions about how much President Biden is actually running things. That's different, and I would argue more significant than Biden tripping on a commencement stage.
What I want to go to ultimately is what the takeaways are for the future if Democrats or Republicans find themselves in a situation like this. And by the way, can we all remember Trump's doctor giving the report about his health?
Oh, Trump is older than Joe Biden was when he was inaugurated, and we know nothing about Trump's health. We have no idea. Yeah, so this is not... covering this is not an excuse for Donald Trump in any way.
So what are the takeaways? What do we learn here for future situations that could be similar that the party can learn?
I'd say two things. One is what Jake was referencing earlier, which is that having sort of mandated health disclosures for presidents, given the amount of power that they have, and maybe like having some sort of under oath mechanism. The other thing I would say is the Democrats often mock, rightly, that Republicans say something different about Trump in private than they do in public. They don't have the guts to say it. And I think this book conclusively shows that Democrats knew and had serious concerns. You guys sort of talked about some of the private concerns, but no one was willing to go public. And I think it shows that you need to listen to your voters and be responsive to them, because the voters were ahead of the curve of where Democratic leaders were.
Well, but the voters voted for Joe Biden in 2024.
2020.
You mean the primary?
The primary.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was not a fair primary. I mean, they changed the order of the states. They didn't allow for any debates. And
the chairman of the Wisconsin Democratic Party tried to keep Dean Phillips off the ballot. That went all the way up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court to put him on the ballot. But
I mean, did you ever see a poll, though, that... that's what I'm saying. I don't know that it's so much of a conspiracy as Democrats looked at the fact that Biden was way ahead in the polls. We never saw a poll that suggested, certainly not that Dean Phillips could run a close race, or Gretchen Whitmer, or anybody else.
Well, nobody's alleging that because Joe Biden didn't have a serious primary challenge that was a conspiracy. That's just incumbency and the protection.
Right, exactly.
That's not part of it. But I would argue, although Alex's point is correct, that the Democratic Party tried to make sure that that was as uncompetitive as possible, but that's not abnormal. I think the question is, why did people who had serious questions about whether or not Joe Biden should run for re-election, why were they so quiet?
And who were those people?
People inside the White House. We have Anita Dunn saying in 2023, are we sure this is a good idea? Jeff Zients becomes the chief of staff, and he's surprised that, having come from Bain Capital, he's surprised there's been no stress testing of this idea. John Anzalone, pollster for Biden, who's been with him since the 1988 campaign, or 1987, I guess he never made it to 88, comes in and says, let's do some polling on this. Let's find out whether or not this is a good idea, what the advantages and disadvantages are. And Anita Dunn says to him, there's no polling, the decision's been made. I mean, why was this decision with very little process or conversation allowed to continue? And then when people saw moments behind the scenes, and we have one very compelling one. You were in Ireland when President Biden was in Ireland in April 2023. Right. There's a very compelling scene with Congressman Quigley seeing Joe Biden behind the scenes melting away, unable to really function, and it reminds him in a very moving way, because this is a tragedy. Let's remember that. If this is a tragedy, this is sad. It reminds him of his dad, who died of Parkinson's. Right. Why was there so little incentive for anybody to say anything about, I don't know that this guy is up for the job, at the very least, of running for re-election? Not to mention, can he be president in January 2029? Is there anybody at this table who thinks that he could be functioning president until January 2029?
No. So let's talk about, you talked about Ireland, and we've talked about what the Democrats can learn. Let's talk about what you can learn and what I can learn. I saw Biden in Ireland. I went to 2 events there one day. They had a winding. I was exhausted. I think Biden did 6 events that day. I called home bitching, saying, "God, I'm like throwing up on the side of the road." It's like this is, But winding all around. Biden does 6 events, and so I go away from that. I see him the next day, interview him. He's doing well. He has a hero's reception in Ireland. I've told you about going in and talking to him for 2.5, 3 hours inside the White House. Far beyond cogent. I mean, really has a grasp of international politics in a way that only somebody who's been doing it since he was 29 years old.
Sure.
We get phone calls at home where the guy is like pounding me because of op-eds that I wrote, et cetera, et cetera. So, I said that this was Biden at his best.
Sure.
That's what I saw.
That's
what other people saw. I was obviously wrong. So I'm not sure what my takeaway is here the next time, but if you're around a guy for hours and hours and hours, I guess the question is, what's the takeaway here? What did you learn? Because did you pick it up in real time?
So, I saw what everybody else saw. Right, I saw what everybody else saw, the stumbles in front of the camera and that. But I saw him in person for the State of the Union luncheon that they do with anchors in early 2023, and then I didn't see him in person. Other than that, I will say 2 things. One of them is there were more moments of non-functioning Biden behind the scenes than we were privy to, that we saw than what we saw. If there are 2 Joe Bidens, there's the one that you saw that you just described, and then there's the one who's non-functioning, like what we saw at the debate night. Can't follow his train of thought, can't come up with names, can't remember dates, what you listen to in the Her report, or he's like unsure of when his son deployed, unsure of when his son died. Tragic stuff, but he really honestly doesn't know those dates.